This bear steals everything. You won't believe what this sneaky little thief stole next." The first light of dawn crept through the ponderosa pines, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Sarah Mason stood on the wooden porch of the main cabin, clutching a steaming mug of coffee between her chilled hands. The crisp Montana morning air filled her lungs as she surveyed the sprawling property of Wild at Heart Wildlife Sanctuary. 10 years ago, this had been nothing but an abandoned ranch. Now it was home to dozens of creatures who couldn't survive in the wild, victims of poaching, the illegal pet trade, accidents, and human cruelty. As the sanctuary's founder and director, Sarah had seen it all. Eagles with clipped wings, wolves raised in captivity, even a one-eyed mountain lion rescued from a roadside zoo. But nothing had prepared her for what waited in the quarantine building that morning. "Sarah, he's awake," called Dr. Mike Reeves, the sanctuary's veterinarian, his voice crackling through the walkie-talkie clipped to her belt. Sarah drained her coffee and set off down the gravel path. When she reached the quarantine building, a converted barn with modern medical equipment, she found Mike hunched over a small cage lined with blankets. Inside, a black bear cub, no more than 4 months old, huddled in the corner, trembling. "How's our little survivor?" Sarah asked. Approaching slowly, Mike straightened, pushing his glasses up his nose. Dehydrated, malnourished, and traumatized. Physically, he'll recover. Mentally, he shook his head. Hard to say. The cub had been found 3 days ago by forest rangers, barricaded inside a hollow tree trunk beside his mother's body. The mother bear had been killed by poachers who took only her gallbladder and paws, leaving her cub to starve. By the time the rangers found him, the little bear had been alone for at least 4 days. "He's got a strong will to live," Mike said. Rangers said the tree hollow entrance was partially blocked with branches. The little guy must have dragged them there himself, trying to protect himself. Sarah knelt by the cage, speaking in soft tones. "Hey there, little one." The cub's eyes, bright with fear and intelligence, locked onto hers. He made a soft, rumbling sound. Not quite a growl, more like a whimper with a hint of defiance. "What should we call him?" Mike asked. Sarah studied the small black bear. Despite his trauma, there was something uniquely present in his gaze, a spark that went beyond mere animal survival instinct. "Moki," she said finally. "Moki?" Mike raised an eyebrow. "It was my grandmother's nickname for me when I was little. Said I was always hiding things away like a little pack rat." Sarah smiled at the memory. "It means one who saves things in her native language." "Fitting." Mike nodded. "Well, Moki, welcome to Wild at Heart." As if understanding, the bear cub gave another soft rumble. 3 weeks later, Sarah wished she'd chosen a different name. Moki had graduated from the quarantine building to a spacious enclosure designed specifically for bear cubs. The space had logs to climb, a small pool, and plenty of natural foliage. It should have been perfect. Instead, it had become the epicenter of the sanctuary's strangest mysteries. "It happened again," grumbled Hank, the grizzled caretaker who managed the sanctuary's maintenance. He stood in Sarah's office holding up a work glove. Found this buried under a pile of leaves in Moki's enclosure. "It's the 3rd one this week." Sarah sighed. "I'll add it to the collection." The collection was a cardboard box in her office labeled Moki's Treasures, already containing a dish towel, 2 unmatched socks, a hairbrush, an empty bottle of cologne, and a tattered paperback novel that had been left too close to the enclosure. "Fence, that bear's got sticky paws," Hank said, dropping the glove into the box. "Never seen anything like it." Dr. Patel mentioned something similar with rescued pandas, Sarah recalled. They sometimes fixate on objects with human scent, especially orphan cubs. It's a comfort mechanism. Well, comfort or not, we need to find a way to stop it. Volunteers are complaining about missing items. Later that afternoon, Sarah observed Moki from the elevated walkway that allowed staff to monitor the enclosures without disturbing the animals. The black bear cub had grown noticeably in just 3 weeks. His coat was shinier, his movements more confident as he explored his surroundings. What caught Sarah's attention, however, was his behavior with the objects he'd accumulated. In a A far corner of the enclosure, partially hidden by a fallen log, Moki had created what could only be described as a nest. The strange collection included the missing items plus natural materials, leaves, twigs, and grass. He wasn't just randomly stealing things. He was carefully arranging them. "It's called a comfort cache," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Emily Chen, their newest veterinary intern, a bright-eyed graduate student from UC Davis. "I've been reading about it," Emily continued, joining Sarah at the railing. "When bear cubs lose their mothers, they sometimes collect objects with strong scents. In the wild, it would be things like rotting logs or aromatic plants. In captivity, they improvise with what's available." "So he's not just being mischievous," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "No. Look how he arranges everything," Emily pointed as Moki carefully adjusted a flannel shirt, source unknown, in his nest. "He's creating a scent bubble. A safe space that smells familiar. It's his way of dealing with the loss of his mother." Sarah watched the cub with new understanding. "So we shouldn't stop him." Emily hesitated. "Well, we can't have him taking visitors' belongings. But maybe we could provide alternatives. Fabric scraps with safe scents, old towels, things like that." For the next week, they tried Emily's suggestion, placing scented items, towels used by staff, worn-out blankets, even sachets of herbs, near Moki's enclosure. Some disappeared into his collection, but the little bear continued his raids whenever opportunity presented itself. The breaking point came during a school tour, when Moki somehow managed to snag a teacher's scarf through the fence, dragging it triumphantly to his nest, while 30 second graders erupted in delighted giggles. "We need a better solution," Sarah admitted to her team during their weekly meeting. "The board is already nervous about next month's fundraising gala. If Moki makes off with Mrs. Ainsworth's purse, we can kiss that matching donation goodbye." Miss Eleanor Ainsworth was the widow of a timber magnate and the sanctuary's most generous benefactor. She had pledged to match all donations raised during the annual gala, potentially up to $500,000. It was money the sanctuary desperately needed for their planned expansion to accommodate more rescues. "What if we move him to the back enclosures? Until after the gala?" suggested Hank. "No," Sarah said firmly. "Moki's one of our success stories. Besides, Mrs. Ainsworth specifically mentioned wanting to see him after that article in the local paper. The article had featured Moki's rescue story, dubbing him the collector of wild at heart. The publicity had already increased visitor donations. "What about a behavioral modification program?" Dr. Mike suggested. "We could work on teaching him which items are acceptable to collect." "That could take months," Emily pointed out. "The gala's in 3 weeks. Then we'll have to bear-proof the event," Sarah decided. "Extra fencing around his enclosure, staff positioned strategically, and everyone warned to keep personal items secure. Meanwhile, Emily, you and I will work with Moki daily. If we can't change his behavior by the gala, maybe we can at least channel it." 2 weeks later, Sarah began to think they were making progress. Moki still collected scented items, but now he accepted substitutes. They provided sachets of lavender, old t-shirts sprayed with diluted essential oils, even stuffed toys left in the donation bin. More importantly, he was thriving physically. The once skeletal cub now weighed a healthy 30 pounds, his black coat gleaming in the summer sun. He'd even begun forming relationships with the sanctuary staff, recognizing individuals and responding differently to each person. With Emily, he was playful, rolling on his back when she approached. With Hank, he was more cautious but attentive. And with Sarah, he displayed an almost protective attitude, once growling at a maintenance worker who approached her too quickly. "He's bonding," Emily observed one evening as they finished their daily session with Moki. "It's remarkable for a wild bear." "He's not really wild, though, is he?" Sarah mused, watching as Moki carefully placed a lavender sachet in his ever-growing nest. "He was too young when he lost his mother. He's imprinting on us instead." "Is that a problem?" Sarah sighed. "It could be. The goal is always to release rescues back into the wild when possible. And if it's not possible, The question hung in the air. Many of Wild at Heart's residents were permanent, too habituated, too humans or too physically compromised to survive in the wild. Was that Moki's fate? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Sarah said finally. For now, let's focus on getting through the gala without incident. As they left the enclosure, neither noticed Moki watching them intently, his bright eyes following their movements until they disappeared from view. The day before the gala brought chaos to Wild at Heart. Volunteers hustled about, stringing lights, in the trees surrounding the main pavilion, arranging tables and setting up the silent auction displays. The normally peaceful sanctuary hummed with activity. Sarah supervised it all with a growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. Everything had to be perfect. Mrs. Ainsworth wasn't just their biggest donor. She was also on the State Wildlife Commission. Her influence could help or hinder the sanctuary's upcoming permit renewal for endangered species rehabilitation. Sarah, Emily's voice, cut through her thoughts. The young intern was jogging toward her, face flushed with excitement. You have to see this. What's wrong? Is it Moki? Nothing's wrong. Just come. Curious, Sarah followed Emily to Moki's enclosure. The bear cub was engaged in what appeared to be a major renovation of his nest. He methodically arranged his collection, seeming to group items by type, fabric items in one section, objects with food scents in another. He's organizing, Emily whispered. I've been watching for an hour. He's creating categories. That's... Sarah struggled to find the word. Unexpected. It's more than that. It's problem-solving behavior we rarely see in bears his age. Most black bear cubs his age would still be with their mothers, learning basic survival skills. Moki's developing his own systems. Sarah watched in fascination as Moki carefully placed a pine cone. Where had he gotten that? Besides several others, then covered them with a dishcloth. The trauma of losing his mother so violently might have triggered accelerated development, Emily suggested. Or maybe he's just special. Special is one word for it, Sarah murmured, remembering the growing list of missing items. Just that morning, one of the volunteers had reported a missing tube of lipstick, last seen near Moki's enclosure. As they watched, Moki suddenly stiffened, nose twitching. He abandoned his nest arranging, stopped as he moved to the edge of his enclosure, pressing his nose against the fence. What's he sensing? Sarah wondered aloud. Emily frowned, following his gaze. Not sure. The wind's coming from the direction of the quarantine building. Is there a new arrival I don't know about? Just the golden retriever puppy animal control brought in yesterday. Hit and run case. He's stable, but weak. Sarah made a mental note to check on the puppy later. For now, the gala preparations demanded her attention. Keep an eye on Moki, she told Emily. If he shows any signs of stress with all this activity, we may need to move him temporarily after all. Emily nodded, her gaze still fixed on the bear cub, who remained at attention, nose working the air currents from the quarantine building's direction. By evening, the sanctuary was transformed. Solar-powered fairy lights twinkled in the trees. Around the main pavilion, tables draped in natural linen held centerpieces of local wildflowers. A small stage had been erected for speeches and the auction. Everything looked perfect. Sarah had just finished her final inspection when her walkie-talkie crackled. Sarah, it's Mike. We have a situation at the civet enclosure. Her heart sinking, Sarah grabbed her emergency kit and hurried across the sanctuary grounds. The civets, small cat-like mammals rescued from an illegal exotic pet dealer, were among their most sensitive residents. Any disruption to their routine could cause significant stress. She found Mike kneeling beside a still form on the ground near the enclosure. "Emily!" Sarah gasped, rushing forward. "She's okay," Mike said quickly. "Fainted. Low blood sugar. I think she mentioned skipping lunch to help with preparations." As if on cue, Emily's eyes fluttered open. "What? Mike, I fainted?" she asked groggily. Sarah helped her sit up slowly. "When was the last time you ate?" "Breakfast." "I got caught up with..." A crash interrupted her, followed by a series of short, urgent growls. All three turned to see Moki, somehow free from his enclosure, barreling toward them with surprising speed for his size. How did he get out? Mike exclaimed, moving protectively in front of Emily. But Moki wasn't charging at them. He skidded to a stop several feet away, rose on his hind legs and let out another series of growls, glancing back the way he'd come. He wants us to follow him, Sarah said, the bear cub's strange behavior triggering a memory of a documentary she'd once seen. An elephant leading humans to an injured calf. That's ridiculous, Mike began, but Emily cut him off. No, she's right. Look at his body language. Indeed, Moki had dropped to all fours and taken a few steps away, then turned back to look at them expectantly. Stay with Emily, Sarah told Mike, then cautiously began following the bear cub. Moki led her back to his enclosure, where Sarah was shocked to find the access gate ajar. Beyond it, the wooden door to the storage shed had been smashed open. Moki, what did you do? She murmured, carefully approaching the damaged door. Inside, chaos, supplies scattered across the floor. A small space heater had tipped over, its power cord frayed near the wall outlet. Sparks jumped from the damaged wire. Oh my God, Sarah breathed, immediately unplugging the heater. The shed contained cleaning supplies, including several flammable liquids. Left unchecked, the sparking cord could have ignited a devastating fire. She turned to find Moki watching from the doorway, his intelligent eyes seeming to ask if she understood. You knew, she whispered. Somehow, you knew. Later, after securing Moki back in his properly latched enclosure and explaining the situation to Mike and a now recovered Emily, Sarah sat alone on the porch of the main cabin, trying to process what had happened. The bear cub hadn't just escaped. He'd sought help. It was more than instinct or training. It showed awareness, problem-solving. As stars began to appear in the darkening Montana sky, Sarah made a decision. Moki wasn't just another rescue. He was something extraordinary, a bridge between the wild world and theirs, and somehow she would honor that uniqueness while keeping both Moki and the sanctuary safe. With renewed determination, she headed inside to finalize preparations for tomorrow's gala. The morning of the gala dawned clear and brilliant, the kind of perfect Montana summer day that reminded Sarah why she'd chosen this remote valley for the sanctuary. Sunlight filtered through the pine trees, casting dappled shadows across the grounds as volunteers rushed through final preparations. Sarah had been up since dawn, the incident with Moki still fresh in her mind. She doubled checks on his enclosure and assigned 2 volunteers to monitor him throughout the event. Everything's under control, Mike assured her as they walked the grounds together. Caterers are set up, silent auction looks great, and even Moki's on his best behavior. They paused near the bear cub's enclosure. Moki lounged on a log, seemingly relaxed. But Sarah knew better. His ears twitched. At every sound, his nose worked the air constantly. I've been thinking about what happened yesterday, Mike said quietly. It's remarkable but not unprecedented. Animals have been known to alert humans to danger. This was different, Sarah insisted. He didn't just alert us. He broke out of a locked enclosure. He came and got me, then led me right to the hazard. That's planning. Mike adjusted his glasses, a habit when deep in thought. I won't argue it's unusual. But we need to be careful not to anthropomorphize. He's still a wild animal. Sarah looked at Moki, who rolled onto his back, paws in the air. Is he, though? She murmured. He was barely weaned when his mother was killed. Everything he knows about being a bear he's learned here, from us, which makes him potentially dangerous, Mike replied gently. Not now, maybe, but black bears can reach 600 pounds. His fixation on humans, his comfort around people, those aren't traits that serve him in the wild. The unspoken question hung between them. What would happen when Moki outgrew the sanctuary? One problem at a time, Sarah said at last. Let's get through today first. By 4 p.m., guests began to arrive. Board members in summer finery, local supporters, even a few celebrities with ranches nearby. All came with checkbooks ready, drawn by the sanctuary's growing reputation, and matching funds pledged by their guest of honor. Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth arrived precisely at 4:30, stepping out of a modest hybrid SUV that belied her wealth. Silver-haired, straight-backed, dressed in linen slacks and a turquoise blouse. The only hint of her fortune was the antique pearl brooch at her collar. "Sarah, dear," she said warmly, clasping Sarah's hands. "What a wonderful turnout, and the sanctuary looks magnificent." "We're honored you could come," Sarah replied. She'd always admired the older woman, who never treated her or the staff with anything less than respect. "Now, Mrs. Ainsworth," declared before the festivities, "I simply must meet this famous bear cub. The Collector, they're calling him. Such a charming story." Sarah exchanged a glance with Mike, who nodded. "Of course, we've just finished a special observation. Platform near his enclosure. You'll have an excellent view." As they walked, Sarah updated her on the sanctuary's recent rescues and successes. Mrs. Ainsworth listened with keen interest, asking thoughtful questions about rehabilitation techniques and release rates. "The work you do here is so important," she said as they neared Moki's enclosure. "In my husband's day, wildlife was seen as an obstacle, but we've come so far in understanding the balance between progress and conservation." They reached the new platform, where guests had already gathered. Emily stood nearby, sharing facts about black bears. "And here's our star resident," Sarah said, gesturing to Moki, who was investigating a puzzle feeder. "Oh my," Mrs. Ainsworth whispered, clearly charmed. "He's absolutely magnificent. So young to have endured such trauma." As if sensing her attention, Moki abandoned the puzzle and ambled toward the fence, curious. "He's very interested in people," Sarah explained. "We think it's tied to his early trauma. He finds comfort in human scent." Mrs. Ainsworth stepped closer. "Hello? There, little one," she said softly. To everyone's surprise, Moki rose on his hind legs, paws on the fence, nose twitching rapidly. "He likes your perfume," Emily smiled. "Shalimar," Mrs. Ainsworth confirmed. "I've worn it for 50 years. My late husband said he could find me in a crowd just by the scent. It was the perfect moment, donor and cub connecting. Sarah could almost see checkbooks opening. Then it all happened at once. A server approached with champagne. Mrs. Ainsworth turned slightly. Moki, still drawn to her scent, stretched further upward. "Mrs. Ainsworth, careful," Sarah began. Too late. Moki's paw darted through a gap in the fence. There was a soft snap, and he dropped to all fours, something glinting in his mouth as he darted to the far corner of his enclosure. "My brooch!" Mrs. Ainsworth gasped, her hand flying to her collar. Gasps and exclamations followed. Sarah's heart sank as she watched Moki disappear into his shelter, the stolen treasure clutched firmly in his mouth. "I'm so terribly sorry," she said. "We'll get it back immediately." But retrieving the brooch proved difficult. Moki had retreated into his den, and Sarah was reluctant to send anyone in. "We could tranquilize him," Mike suggested during a hushed conference. "Absolutely not," Sarah said. "Too risky. It would break his trust." "Then what? That brooch is practically priceless." Sarah glanced at Mrs. Ainsworth, now surrounded by board members. Surprisingly, she looked more concerned than angry. "Give me until after dinner," Sarah said. "The speeches start at 8. If we haven't recovered it by then, I'll offer compensation." Mike looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll keep her distracted." For the next hour, Sarah and Emily took turns watching Moki's enclosure, hoping he'd reappear with the brooch. Or at least give them a clue. Eventually, Moki emerged but gave no sign of the jewelry. "He must have added it to his collection," Emily said. "But where? We've identified 3 different nests in his enclosure, and he..."